Lin Tian is reincarnated as a goblin, the weakest of all magical creatures. At first, he has to stay hidden and be careful. Later, he shows the true nature of a goblin. He is blessed with many children, and the more he has, the stronger he becomes, thanks to the blessings from the gods. The cave is shrouded in darkness, filled with the chilling echoes of terrifying screams as the goblins celebrate the death of their leader. Among them, a goblin with bloodshot red eyes goes mad, declaring himself the new leader. Another goblin, however, objects, claiming he deserves the position since he did the most work. Fueled by envy and rage, he lunges at his comrade, biting into his nose. Because, of course, nothing says "I'm the leader" like biting someone's nose off. Chaos erupts, and the cave fills with more violent screams as other goblins gather around, watching the fight with glee. They start placing bets on the outcome, as if this is their version of a weekend sporting event. This chaotic atmosphere is their favorite pastime, bringing them endless joy in their otherwise dreary goblin lives. Amidst the commotion, some goblins whisper about bringing out the human girl their old leader had hidden. They grumble that he hadn't even touched her yet, clearly disappointed in his lack of goblin efficiency. They plot to find and take her for themselves, though a few hesitate because she's protected by that weird goblin. Unlike the others, who wear basic rags, this goblin is draped in tattered clothes that cover almost his entire body. It's like he's trying to make a fashion statement in a cave, a goblin trendsetter, perhaps. His terrifying appearance and the aura he exudes, suspiciously human-like, set him apart. The goblins assume that with the leader dead, this strange goblin will keep the girl for himself, because why wouldn't he? After all, he's the only one with a sense of style around here. They decide to follow him and seize the girl when the time is right. Some of the more cunning goblins suggest waiting longer, as their strongest members have already gone ahead to find the girl. They plan to let the weird goblin fight these members, then swoop in to kill him and finally take the girl. It's a plan with all the brilliance of a goblin strategy, which is to say, it's full of holes. They don't realize the strange goblin can hear them plotting. Realizing the girl is in danger, the strange goblin rushes back to where she's held captive, easily outpacing the other goblins with his impressive speed. It's almost as if he's in a hurry to audition for the Goblin Olympics. Upon arrival, he is horrified, though not entirely surprised, to see the rebellious goblins preparing to violate the girl. She pleads for help, her eyes wide with fear, as if to say, "Not again, goblins." The weird goblin confronts them, demanding they release her, which might be the most heroic thing a goblin has ever done in their entire history. The lead goblin, naturally, refuses, feeling entitled to the girl now that the old leader is gone. He puffs out his chest, which, let's be honest, doesn't do much when you're only 3 feet tall. The weird goblin, however, is determined to protect her. The lead goblin and his henchmen attack, aiming to kill him, because that's what goblins do best: solve problems with violence. Outnumbered, the weird goblin fights back fiercely, using every trick he knows. Considering his human background, that's quite a few. He doesn't believe these low-level goblins can defeat him, and is resolved not to die in such a grimy, smelly place. Seizing an opportunity, he grabs a weapon and kills the biggest goblin, who immediately regrets getting involved in this mess. The others, seeing this, suddenly remember they have somewhere else to be and flee the scene, not forgetting to shout threats about returning with reinforcements, because goblins do love their dramatic exits. Even after they leave, the weird goblin remains on guard, aware that this is just the beginning of more challenging days. The girl, whose name is Kelia, thanks him for saving her, noting how different he is from the other goblins. She's noticed, for instance, that he hasn't tried to bite her face off, which is a big plus in her book. She hopes he won't die because finding a goblin who isn't trying to kill you is rare, and she'd rather keep him around. The deeper reason for the weird goblin's actions is that he's actually a human named Lamin. A few days prior, Lamin had died in a tragic accident, which, let's be honest, is never a good day. Instead of meeting a divine entity, he finds himself transported to another world with a system, though not a very cooperative one. His system isn't fully activated, and apart from showing some stats, it doesn't do much else, like a broken video game. Kelia, who seems to know everything about this world, explains the significance of those stats in this world ruled by gods and inhabited by powerful monsters. Here, humans demonstrate their dominance through sheer power, which of course, Lamin doesn't have. Unfortunately, he's been reborn as the weakest and dirtiest creature, a goblin with laughably low stats. His current level is 5, with an HP of 20, strength of 5, and defense of 5, totaling an overall strength of 30. His stats are so low that even the weakest monsters would feel sorry for him. Fortunately, his name remains unchanged, Lamin. There's a way to become stronger, though it goes against his morals. Goblins, being the classy creatures they are, can increase their power through constant mating. But since goblins don't have females, they resort to kidnapping women of other species. Lamin, being a former human, finds this practice beyond disgusting but realizes he needs to become stronger to survive. He's stuck between a rock and a hard place, or in this case, a rock and a goblin. Kelia, seeing his worry, reassures him not to overthink it. She understands he's different from other goblins and doesn't want to be associated with them. With a hopeful smile, she promises that when the knights arrive to rescue her, she'll vouch for him. The knights, being fair and just, might let him live in her village, which sounds better than living in a cave full of goblins. This gives Lamin hope, though he's still concerned about how he'll explain his new look. Things take a turn when they hear a scream signaling the goblin's return. Without hesitation, Lamin orders Kelia to hide, which she does immediately because hiding from goblins is something she's become quite good at. The first goblin to appear charges at him, shouting that humans have arrived and it wants to mate with the girl to grow stronger, which Lamin finds both disturbing and oddly desperate. In its haste, the goblin makes itself an easy target, and Lamin swiftly kills it, feeling slightly sorry for the poor thing's lack of strategy. He informs Kelia that humans are there to save her. Overjoyed, Kelia assumes it's a knight and wants to check, but Lamin watches with concern as the knight, named Law, easily dispatches the goblins, expressing his disgust for them in a way that suggests he's had a bad day. Law, level 25, with strength 30 and defense 50, wears platinum armor and wields an iron sword, giving him a total power of 400. This makes Lamin feel like a rusty nail in comparison. Kelia approaches Law, calling out to him in excitement. Lamin, noticing Law raising his sword, acts quickly, pushing her out of the way just in time. Despite saving her, Lamin is bewildered by Law's attack, wondering if this knight missed the memo about saving damsels in distress, not decapitating them. Law angrily denounces the idea of a goblin being near a human and assumes Kelia has been defiled, jumping to the worst conclusion, because that's what knights seem to do these days. Kelia tries to explain she hasn't been defiled, pointing to Lamin as her protector. Law, however, doesn't believe her, dismissing the idea that a goblin could save anyone, let alone be anything but a pest. As Law raises his sword to kill Kelia, Lamin can't stand by and watch. With no other choice, he steps forward, pushing Kelia aside and confronting Law, hoping to buy her enough time to escape. Lamin grabs his crude weapon and lunges at Law, because really, what's one more fight in this crazy day? Just before they collide, an aura envelops Lamin, leaving both him and Law astonished. The aura comes from a woman dressed in white, radiating holiness and an air of someone who doesn't take nonsense. She orders Law to stop, sensing something strange about Lamin. This woman is Ephra, the saint, and she's here to ruin everyone's day in a holy sort of way. Kelia, seizing the moment, begs Ephra to save them. Ephra helps Kelia to her feet and presents her to Law, who had tried to kill them moments before. Then, Ephra turns her attention to Lamine and asks if he can understand her. Lamine, trapped within the barrier, recognizes Ephra as the saint and spokesperson for the divine temple, his potential savior. He quickly responds that he can understand her, explaining that he's a former human transformed due to an accident. He pleads with Ephra to take him along, promising to explain everything, though he suspects his explanation might not go over well. Lo dismisses Lamine as just a smarter-than-average goblin, but Ephra smiles, amused by the situation. She acknowledges that goblins are typically stupid and lowly creatures, which doesn't do much for Lamine's self-esteem. Ephra then asks Kalia to confirm if Lamine protected her, and Kalia joyfully confirms that he did, noting that he provided her with food and didn't try to eat her, which in goblin terms makes him practically a saint. Pleased, Ephra decides to take Lamine back to the temple for further study, because who wouldn't want a goblin pet? Lamine eagerly agrees, thinking things might finally be looking up. However, as they prepare to leave, Lamine notices a cruel smile on Ephra's face. Suddenly, he hears the sound of metal-piercing flesh. In horror, he turns to find Kalia's lifeless body on the ground. Stunned, he realizes the truth. He's been played like a fiddle in the devil's orchestra. Ephra mocks his naivety, telling him that following her willingly was the best way to repay her. Lamine, filled with rage, accuses her of tricking him and killing Kalia, questioning the temple's supposed justice. Ephra, unimpressed, silences him with a sharp thrust of her staff, reminding him that he's nothing but a weak, filthy goblin. She declares that goblins are insects, and it's an honor that she even spoke to him. Lamine, now helpless, endures endless torture. Even in his unconscious state, he's awakened to more torment, wondering if he'll die there, regretting his foolishness and the trust he placed in humans. His suffering finally ends when he's tortured to death by the cruel woman. In his final moments, he wishes that if he had another chance, he'd never trust humans again. He dreams of revenge, but that seems impossible until he wakes up in a different space, filled with white light. A system window appears, informing him that the Goblin Life Simulation system has been activated. It asks if he wants to start again. Lamine, startled but eager for revenge, chooses to be reborn. This time, he's ready for anything, even if it means living his life as a Goblin 2.0. As the white light envelops him, Lamine smiles, ready for round 2. He has one chance, and he's not wasting it. The system warns him of impending danger, but Lamine isn't afraid. He's been given a second chance, and this time, he plans to use it wisely. He begins a simulation, thinking carefully about his choices. Despite the challenges ahead, Lamine is determined to survive and get his revenge. As he prepares to escape the Goblin Cave, he knows one thing for sure. This time, things will be different. This time, the goblins and humans alike will learn not to underestimate him. One of the guards enters the cave, hiding a knife behind his back, trying his best to sound reassuring as he tells the supposed girl that he's from the temple and there to take everyone home. The guard, who clearly thinks he's the hero of the day, is in for a surprise. Instead of a frightened woman, he finds Lamine, a goblin, holding a sharp knife and looking anything but welcoming. The other guard, noticing his comrade's hesitation, decides to check on him. The moment he spots Lamine, he looks as if he's just seen his worst nightmare, because, well, he has. In a flash, Lamine tosses the first mite's body aside and charges at the second guard with incredible speed. Lamine's agility allows him to easily wound the guard, who collapses to the ground, pain and fear written all over his face. Overcome with terror, the guard begins pleading for his life, babbling about his family, trying to show Lamine a picture as if that would help. He praises Lamine's intelligence, saying he was just following orders and wasn't really into this whole goblin killing thing, but Lamine isn't buying it. The guard even goes as far as offering Lamine a bag of gold and the most beautiful woman he can find, clearly mistaking Lamine for someone who cares about gold, or women, for that matter. But Lamine's patience is running thin, and he's not one to fall for such tricks. For someone like Lamine, who's been betrayed by the so-called good guys, these pleas only fuel his anger. The guard's true intentions are painfully obvious. He's hoping Lamine will hesitate long enough for him to find a way out. But Lamine, already familiar with human deception, swiftly and coldly ends the guard's life. There's a brief moment where Lamine feels a twinge of pity for the guard's family. But he knows that in this world, mercy can be as dangerous as any sword. As Lamine catches his breath, his attention is drawn to voices in the distance. It's Law and his men getting closer. With no time to waste, Lamine quickly strips the guard's clothes and flees, promising himself that one day he'll make Law and Ephra pay for what they've done. Meanwhile, Law and Ephra arrive at the scene and are greeted by the sight of two very dead temple knights. Law, always the optimist, immediately suspects a goblin ambush, noting the clean, swift cuts that are far too precise for your average goblin. Ephra, ever the mad scientist, is practically giddy with excitement. She licks her lips in anticipation, already imagining what experiments she'll conduct on this mysterious goblin. As night falls, casting eerie shadows over the forest, Lamine finds himself panting heavily. He's alive, but only just. He's been running non-stop, but he knows he can't let his guard down. After all, humans have shown him time and again that they hate goblins with a passion that borders on obsessiveness. As Lamine tries to catch his breath, he thinks to himself that if humans hate goblins so much, he might as well start using goblin tactics against them. After all, goblins have their own way of getting stronger, though it's a method Lamine finds both disgusting and disturbingly efficient. With hatred simmering in his heart, Lamine vows that he'll make all men experience the happiness of death, and all women kneel at his feet in fear, especially Law and Ephra. Just as Lamine is working up a good bit of dark determination, his thoughts are interrupted by the rustling of leaves. Worried that Law's henchmen might still be on his trail, Lamine decides to strike first. He charges at the source of the noise, only to stop short when he realizes his opponent is another goblin. This isn't just any goblin though. This one has distinctly female characteristics. For a moment, Lamine is too stunned to speak. Goblins are supposed to be all male, so what's she doing here? The female goblin, who looks just as shocked as Lamine feels, quickly drops to the ground, begging him not to hurt her. She stammers something about just fetching water, her wide eyes full of fear. Lamine, curious and a bit bewildered, checks her attributes using his assessment skill. To his surprise, she's only level 3 with an overall strength of 10. But what really catches his attention is a special note indicating that if a male and female goblin combine, they could become the legendary Goblin God. Seeing the dark thoughts in Lamine's eyes, the female goblin backs away, clearly worried about what's going through his mind. She explains that she was caught by the patriarch to fetch water, and that if she doesn't return soon, she'll be beaten to death. Lamine, realizing he's probably scaring the poor girl half to death, apologizes and tries to comfort her, though his idea of comfort is a bit awkward. He pats her shoulder, telling her not to cry because it would attract bad people, which in goblin terms is probably sound advice. The female goblin, still a bit shaky, is more interested in how Lamine can speak like her. Her eyes light up with excitement, and she clings to his cloak, remarking that he's much nicer than the other goblins who just beat her up all the time. She suggests that Lamine come back to her tribe with her, revealing the existence of a nearby goblin camp. Lamine's eyes light up at the opportunity to recruit some followers, a first in goblin history. When they arrive at the goblin camp, the other goblins eye Lamine warily. He looks and dresses too much like a human for their comfort. Lamine calmly explains that he wants to join them and meet their leader, But the goblins aren't exactly the welcoming committee. They decide to capture Lamin and drag him to see the patriarch. The female goblin steps in, trying to defend Lamin, but the commotion only attracts more attention. The patriarch, an old goblin with a staff decorated with skulls, approaches. He's clearly not your average goblin, with a level 25 priest profession and an intimidating set of skills. The patriarch asks the female goblin if she brought the stranger to the camp. When she nervously confirms, the patriarch praises her for doing a good job, then immediately orders the other goblins to capture Lamin. The goblins, excited at the prospect of a fresh meal, shove the girl aside and prepare to pounce. But Lamin isn't about to go down without a fight. He draws his weapon and orders the goblins to halt, claiming that he can forge weapons that will make their tribe stronger. The iron knife he holds catches the patriarch's attention. The leader, suspicious but curious, moves closer to Lamin, sniffing him like a dog trying to figure out if a bone is worth burying. Lamin, ever the salesman, explains that he can make weapons from iron if they can find ore. He promises that with time, he can produce weapons far more powerful than his knife. The patriarch, recognizing the potential, decides to give Lamin a chance. He demands that Lamin find iron ore and create weapons within 3 days or face death, along with the female goblin who brought him here. No pressure, right? The next morning, Lamin leads the goblins on a search for iron ore. By nightfall, Gobu, the female goblin, is exhausted. She's been beaten by her kin and threatened with death for failing to find ore. Lamin, disgusted by their treatment of her, throws a rock at one of the goblins to get their attention. He scolds them for fighting among themselves instead of focusing on the task at hand, threatening to kill anyone who doesn't cooperate. The goblins, now fearing Lamin more than they fear the patriarch, quickly get back to work. With the iron secured, Lamin turns his attention to becoming stronger. He notices a notification about mating with Gobu to become a Goblin God, and after some awkward hesitation, decides to go for it. Seeing Gobu in distress, he tries to comfort her, proposing that they join forces to become stronger. Gobu, unsure but hopeful, agrees to help. Lamin, a bit embarrassed but determined, reassures her, and they proceed with the union. As a result, Lamin's level increases, and his physical attributes improve significantly. He's now stronger with defined muscles and enhanced stats. Feeling more confident, Lamin assures Gobu of his protection and affection, though he's still figuring out how to handle this whole Goblin God thing. Just as they're starting to enjoy their newfound power, a goblin appears, fleeing from a large wolf while carrying iron ore. Lamin, always ready for a fight, charges at the wolf with his knife, swiftly killing it with a single blow. The goblin, terrified by Lamin's prowess, hands over the iron ore without a second thought. Holding the high-quality ore, Lamin knows that with more of this, he can fulfill his promise and create powerful weapons for the tribe. 2 days pass, and with the help of other goblins, Lin Tian successfully creates a spear with an iron blade. Though it isn't pretty, it is a major accomplishment for Lin Tian and the goblins. The goblins can't believe Lin Tian actually creates a weapon out of iron, but they wonder if it will work. To prove the effectiveness of the new weapon, Lin Tian easily plunges the spearhead into the tough skull of the #1 crocodile wolf. As expected, the spearhead pierces through. Lin Tian grins and says, "Looks like I just invented polka dot for crocodile wolves." The goblin Lin Tian saved before is incredibly excited. He points at the crocodile wolf's corpse and exclaims, "Well, that was faster than a goblin with his tail on fire." This demonstrates that Lin Tian can indeed make weapons. The other goblins agree that the iron spear is much stronger than the stone spears. While the goblins discuss this, Lin Tian holds the spear high and asks if they want weapons like this. Without hesitation, the other goblins shout decisively that they do and hail him as a god. One goblin jokes, "I'd say you are the god of sharp objects." Only one goblin is not happy, the goblin leader. He is upset that a newcomer has stolen his respect. The leader grabs attention by slamming the skullhead staff in his hand onto the ground. With menacing red eyes, he admits that Lin isn't lying, but says it isn't enough for Lin Tian to stay in the tribe. While Lin Tian and the other goblins listen, the leader demands that Lin create 50 iron spears within 2 days. After making his demand, the leader immediately leaves, seeing it as a step forward in his plan. On the day of delivery, Lin completes the 50 iron spears. With the same menacing look and cunning smile, the leader says, well, Mr. Overachiever, you actually did it. He then announces that Lin can now stay. To celebrate his joining the tribe, the leader decides to hold a feast and demands that everyone participate. The goblins immediately start dancing and celebrating. The feast quickly takes place around the bonfire. Gobu cuts out a piece of pork and brings it to Lin Tian, as it is the best part, and she wants him to eat it. Lin Tian happily accepts, but after eating for a while, a sharp pain hits him. Lin Tian falls to the ground in agony, and Gobu is scared. It is clear that Lin has been poisoned. The poisoner is none other than the leader. He walks up to Lin with an evil smile and says, "You know, trusting me was your first mistake. Your second mistake was, well, I guess just trusting me again." The leader tells Lin Tian he is too stupid and says he knows Lin Tian's true intentions. He adds, "Those who dare challenge my authority only get one prize, a one-way ticket to Goblin Hell." Before Lin can speak, the leader grabs Gobu's hair and pulls her towards him. The leader says, "I see you care about her very much. So let me introduce you to my favorite hobby, making people miserable." A red line of blood appears on Gobu's neck as the leader's claw stabs into her. The leader wants to crush Lin Tian's arrogance and make him suffer. In Gobu's scared eyes, a red stream of blood spurts out, but it isn't Gobu's blood. It's the leader's, as his arm is cut off. Lin Tian has done it. The leader fearfully asks, "How are you moving? Did someone forget to tell you that you're poisoned?" Lin Tian smiles and says, "Guess I'm just too stubborn to die." "Oh, and I knew you were going to poison me. Got a little heads up from the system. Thanks for the heads up, by the way." The leader is now incredibly upset. He has no choice but to fight, but he has lost an arm, so his fighting power has decreased. He uses the bone chain in his hand to attack Lin Tian. Lin Tian quickly responds with rapid movements, easily dodging the attack. He jumps, and his iron knife aims at the leader's head. The leader is killed. The goblins see that their leader is dead and are scared. Lin Tian looks at them and declares, "Guess what, folks? You've got a new leader, and I promise you'll always have meat to eat." He hugs Gobu and raises his knife high, declaring his supremacy over the tribe. With Lin Tian's strength, the other goblins readily agree to him being their leader. After all, they are simple-minded creatures who only care about meat and mating. As a reward for their loyalty, Lin Tian offers them the leader's corpse. Given permission, they immediately reveal their wild nature. They devour the corpse in a cruel and savage way, making Lin feel disgusted, but he mutters to himself, "Well, at least I won't have to worry about leftovers." What matters to him now is building his tribe, nurturing the next generation of goblins to make the tribe stronger. This is just the first step in his revenge. Amidst the chaos, no one notices a pair of eyes watching everything from afar. It is a golden-haired elf girl, witnessing the scene and wondering, what in the name of all things magical is happening here? Chapter #6. Under the eerie moonlight, strange houses emerge from the shadows of towering trees. An elf girl moves swiftly, leaping from tree to tree, before slipping into a brightly lit house. This girl is Kasana, the princess of the elf community. She has been secretly observing Lin Tian's goblin tribe, gathering information. Her heart races as she hurries through the house, eager to report to her mother. A guard elf spots her and smiles, clearly relieved to see her return. But Kasana ignores him, brushing past without a word. Her mind is too full of the strange events she has witnessed. Pushing open a door, she rushes into the room and immediately speaks to her mother, the queen. Kasana tells her of the strange activity in the goblin tribe in the eastern forest. But as she finishes speaking, she notices the scene inside the room. Kasana freezes, her face turning red. She stammers an apology, trying to excuse herself. But before she can leave, the queen's voice cuts through her embarrassment. The queen demands that Kasana stay and explain the urgent matter that brought her there. The queen listens with mild interest, for she views goblins as nothing more than low-level, feeble, and dirty creatures. Kasana, catching her breath, quickly explains that she found the remains of a massive bear in the demon forest. The bear was completely mangled, with signs of a fierce battle and numerous goblin footprints all around. Kasana's voice grows anxious as she explains that this bear is one of the mightiest creatures in the forest, something no goblin should be able to kill. What worries her more is that just a few days ago, she saw a young goblin kill the goblin leader. She fears the two events are connected. The queen, though slightly surprised by the news of a new goblin leader, remains mostly unconcerned. What intrigues her, however, is the increasing number of goblins in the forest. The queen snaps her fingers, dismissing the men who had been attending her. She orders Kasana to lead a group to the goblin tribe and eradicate them. However, she instructs her daughter to leave a few goblins alive, revealing that she needs their hearts to concoct a potion for the elf men. Kasana hesitates, knowing the effects of the elixir her mother plans to make. But she bows her head and accepts the mission, feeling uneasy about the queen's true intentions. Before leaving, the queen rewards Kasana for her hard work by offering her a night with a man of her choice. Kasana, embarrassed and taken aback by the offer, quickly makes an excuse about needing to prepare for the mission and bids farewell to her mother. Meanwhile, at Lin Tian's camp, the goblins gather around a detailed map of the elf tribe. This map, meticulously researched by Lin Tian's subordinates, shows the layout of the elf village, with its 30 houses located at high elevations in the trees. Lin Tian praises his subordinates for their work and promises them a reward of 2 elf girls, each after they defeat the tribe. He then instructs everyone to prepare iron weapons for the battle ahead. Although the idea of attacking another tribe does not bring Lin Tian joy, he knows that in this world, survival is determined by strength. If he does not build his tribe into a formidable force, they will eventually be wiped out. He carefully assesses the situation. The elf village consists of 30 houses. If each house holds 2 elves, that makes a total of 60 elves. Considering the 10 elves guarding the mine, the tribe should have at least 70 individuals. Lin Tian recalls how, since the demise of their former leader, he has led the goblins in crafting weapons and hunting monsters. These efforts have greatly enhanced their abilities. The goblins, under Lin Tian's command, surge through the forest like a tidal wave, slaying numerous monsters and consuming their flesh. By devouring these monsters, many goblins acquire new skills, such as tusk attacks, skin toughened like stone, silent movement, and venom production. Although not all goblins gain these abilities, the overall strength of the tribe has improved significantly. Some exceptional goblins have even reached level 18, boasting impressive stats. Combined with their basic iron spears and armor, the tribe's total strength now stands at 250, with the average goblin's strength reaching 200. Despite these gains, Lin Tian knows that the collective strength of the elf tribe still surpasses theirs. This leaves Lin Tian feeling uneasy. The upcoming battle is perilous, and he is determined to prepare thoroughly. He decides to use the simulation system to devise an effective attack strategy. The simulation begins, and Lin Tian leads his goblin army in an assault on the elf tribe. He is confident in their victory, but the simulation takes a dark turn. The elves ambush the goblins, who fall into a carefully laid trap. Lin Tian himself is captured by the elf leader and hung in the demon forest as a warning to other goblins. The simulation ends in failure, with no points awarded. Lin Tian is puzzled by the outcome, especially the message that the results were under someone else's control. He quickly concludes that the only explanation is that his tribe is being monitored by the elves. Closing his eyes, he concentrates, relying on the goblin's exceptional hearing and keen sense of smell to detect any irregularities. Sure enough, he picks up on unusual sounds in the distance, confirming his suspicions. Meanwhile, the elves, led by Kasana, are hurrying back to their tribe. Kasana is determined to report to her mother, but is unaware that they have already been discovered. As they near the village, arrows suddenly rain down on them. Kasana is wounded and filled with fear as she sees her fellow elves falling around her. In the distance, Lin Tian and the goblins approach with sinister grins, thrilled to have captured a living elf. Kasana tries to escape, but her wound is too severe. She feels a strange sensation, as if the arrow that struck her was tainted with something. Lin Tian approaches, astonished at how easily he captured Kasana. He remarks, well, what do we have here? Looks like the elf princess has decided to drop by for dinner. Literally. He orders his subordinates to capture all the remaining elves. Chapter #7. When Kasana awakens, she finds herself drenched in an unfamiliar liquid. Her clothes cling to her body, and she feels exposed under the leering eyes of the goblins. She tries to intimidate Lin Tian, calling him a coward and announcing her status as the elf princess. She warns him that if he harms her, the elf queen will annihilate all the goblins in the forest. Lin Tian, unfazed, replies, "Coward? Me? Nah, I just prefer a fair fight. You know, one where I'm guaranteed to win." He reveals that he knows the queen's true intent is to eradicate the goblins. He scoffs at Kasana's claim of her mother's benevolence and throws her to the ground. He then commands the goblins to feast on the dead elves and absorb their abilities. The goblins roar in delight, while Kasana is paralyzed with fear. Lin Tian coldly tells her that he will personally deal with her. The system announces that Lin Tian has reached level 30, gaining new abilities, including invisibility and night vision. The scene shifts to the elf village, where the queen is indulging herself. She is suddenly reminded of Kasana and inquires if her daughter has returned. When informed that Kasana is overdue, the queen grows concerned. She orders a team to find her daughter and eliminate the goblins, but before they can act, the goblin army attacks the elf village. Lin Tian captures the elf queen and forces her to watch as her village burns. The goblins overwhelm the elves, who beg for mercy. Lin Tian reveals that the arrows used by the goblins are coated with a paralyzing fluid, rendering the queen helpless. He offers to spare her life if she agrees to his terms. The queen, realizing her defeat, reluctantly agrees, hoping to protect her remaining children. Lin Tian leans in and whispers, "Congratulations, you've just won the You Get to Live prize. But don't get too excited. It's not a lifelong membership." Chapter #8. The next morning, Kasana and the elf queen meet again in the goblin tribe. Kasana, now a captive, feels hopeless about their future. The elf queen embraces her daughter and apologizes for underestimating the goblins. She acknowledges that only women and children remain in the elf tribe, leaving them defenseless. Outside, the captured elf girls are being used by the goblins as reproductive tools. The elf queen, heartbroken by the scene, realizes that they have become slaves. She tells Kasana not to lose hope, even in their dire situation. Just then, Lin Tian appears and orders them to wait obediently and bear children for him, promising food in return. The elf queen, having accepted her fate, requests to care for the young elves who are playing with the goblin children. Lin Tian, who was once human, understands the bond between mother and child. He hesitates but agrees to her request. As time passes, goblin children are born. All have the appearance of goblins, which horrifies their elf mothers. They refuse to accept the children as their own, but Lin Tian knows these offspring are vital for the tribe's future strength. The goblins continue to grow stronger, but Lin Tian's mind remains focused on revenge against Loa. One day, Lin Tian hears a scream and discovers that two goblins are attempting to assault an elf who has just given birth. Enraged, he kills one of the goblins and sternly reminds the others that elves who have given birth must be given time to recover. Did I stutter? He snaps at the remaining goblin, who cowers in fear. This act of discipline earns him some respect from the elf queen, who notes that he is different from ordinary goblins. Lin Tian dismisses her praise, stating, "Treat them well, and they might just forget their prisoners, at least for a while." Lin Tian continues to plan his revenge. He uses the simulation system to strategize, choosing to act alone in an attempt to kill Loa. However, the plan fails when a human knight intervenes, killing Lin Tian in the simulation. Realizing the strength of his enemies, Lin Tian decides to venture into human territory to continue his quest for vengeance. Before leaving, Lin Tian places Gobu in charge of the tribe, trusting her to maintain order in his absence. The elf queen, worried about his safety, offers to help by using invisibility magic on him. Lin Tian is initially surprised by her concern, but accepts her help, understanding that she is motivated by a desire to protect her children. As Lin Tian leaves the goblin tribe, Gobu promises to take care of the tribe and hopes for his safe return. Lin Tian knows the journey ahead is fraught with danger, but his desire for revenge drives him forward. He turns back and grins at Gobu, saying, "Don't throw any wild parties while I'm gone, unless you invite me." The scene shifts to the town of Bright Town. The air feels heavy with tension. Knights patrol the streets, armed and watchful. The faces of ordinary citizens show their worry. These knights scan the area, searching for something. They do not notice a shadowy figure lurking in a dark alley. This figure is Lam. He silently observes from the shadows, confused by the presence of the patrol. Suspecting the holy knights are involved, Lam leaves the deserted alley. Lam walks for a long time without hearing anything about Loda's group. This strangeness makes him hurry his steps. Using an elf's invisibility spell, he remains unnoticed as he searches for information. Lam decides to go to the town square, where many people are gathered. In the town square, Lam notices a group of armed individuals gathered in front of a large bulletin board. The board displays a ranking list of the knights in the town. While the ranking list isn't particularly interesting, it shows 1 platinum level adventurer, 2 silver level ones, and the rest bronze level. What catches Lam's eye is Loda's name at the top of the list. This confirms that Loda has grown stronger. Lam knows this information is useful. He needs to gather more data and plan carefully. Rushing into things will lead to failure in his quest for revenge. Lam quickly blends into the crowd and moves through the streets. Having been human himself, he knows the best place to gather information is a tavern. To Lam's surprise, even before entering the tavern, he hears a familiar voice. A cunning smile spreads across his face. Inside, besides Loda and the Knights of the Temple, there is also Ephra. They are happily drinking together. One knight raises his glass and expresses gratitude to Ephra and Loda for saving him from a forest ape monster. Ephra says this is Captain Loda's victory, and that she wouldn't have been able to help without his exceptional skills. Another man argues that the monster was too weak. He says the knight's failure to defeat it proves his weakness. This sarcastic remark enrages the knight. He tells the man that their story doesn't concern him and orders him to leave. A heated argument begins, and they are on the verge of a fight. The tavern owner quickly diffuses the situation. He reveals that the dragon on Dragon Island is currently in its breeding season. It has been kidnapping livestock and humans to eat. He suggests the two go defeat the dragon instead of causing trouble in the tavern. These words from the tavern owner catch Lam's attention. He senses worry that if the dragon attacks this town, the capital's reinforcements won't arrive in time. Even if all the adventurers in the town unite, they wouldn't withstand the attack of those ferocious dragons. Disaster seems to be looming over the town. The atmosphere in the tavern becomes tense. Loda breaks the silence with a laugh. He says a few dragons are nothing to worry about. He confidently introduces the Holy Knight as his teacher. He says once she arrives, she will help them defeat the dragons. The king won't need to send his army after the situation is resolved. Their group will return to the capital. This news excites the crowd. They're astonished to learn that Loda's teacher is a holy knight. They feel confident knowing she will help defeat the dragons. If this is successful, Loda will become the town's hero. Flattered by the praise, Loda proudly stands up and raises a toast to everyone. He celebrates the Holy Knight's arrival and their imminent victory over the dragons. While everyone is happily drinking, Lam has a different plan. He needs to make the most of this opportunity. Lam stands up, pays his bill, and leaves. His departure catches Loda's attention. Loda asks why Lam is leaving without joining them for drinks. Lam turns his head and looks at Loda. He says they will have plenty of opportunities to drink together in the future. Then he leaves. His actions draw the attention of Loda and his men, provoking their anger. Time flies by, and the people in town cheerfully celebrate the Holy Knight's arrival. Inside a church, a blonde-haired woman is praying. Loda stands behind her. He politely addresses her as Master. He says the dragons are wreaking havoc everywhere and are getting closer to the town. No one dares to let their livestock out, as the dragons might attack. The woman takes up her weapon and stands up. She is beautiful, with captivating blonde hair. Her silver armor gives her a commanding presence. She asks Loda about the things she requested him to prepare. Loda reports that he has prepared 10 dragon hunting crossbows and placed them at the highest points in the town. The woman seems pleased. She tells Loda to arrange everything well, as a mistake would be a huge embarrassment. The woman walks outside, and the crowd below is immediately in an uproar. It is the first time they have seen the Holy Knight. They praise her beauty and wonder which man could possibly win her heart. They think she is an unattainable existence that even the king wouldn't dare to express an opinion about. The woman looks at the worried crowd and says the situation is very dangerous. It is unnecessary to gather so many people here. She orders the knights to disperse the crowd, but it seems that is no longer necessary. The commotion draws the attention of the dragon. It charges at the town, terrifying everyone. One unlucky person is taken by the dragon. The woman anxiously announces this is just a scout dragon. Once it appears, more dragons will surely attack. Loda is told to take his men to the wall and prepare to fight outside the town. On a cliff outside the town, a goblin scurries along. He informs his leader that the dragons are coming. From what he observed, there are many guards on the wall. The goblin asks what he should do next. The leader, who is Lam, tells him to be silent and wait. It is not time to act yet. Lam has brought his army here, and he is waiting for the dragons to inflict damage upon the town. Then it will be his chance to seek revenge. A horde of dragons appears in the sky, flying toward the City of Light. Suddenly, a powerful golden light pierces the chest of one dragon, killing it instantly. Loda and Defraya look up in shock. They see the Sword Saint on the city wall. She has fired the deadly shot with a crossbow. The Sword Saint quickly instructs the knight beside her on how to use the crossbows to hunt dragons. The knights understand her command and begin loading the crossbows. They start shooting down the approaching dragons. Excitement grows as their attacks bring down dragon after dragon. As they fight, a knight notices ominous purple clouds and thunder in the sky. Suddenly, a massive dragon appears. This dragon is larger and more powerful than the others. Its roar is so loud that it makes some knights wince in pain. This is the mother of purple gold. The knights realize their crossbows are useless against her, and they begin to retreat in fear. The mother dragon stares down at the knights. She raises her head and unleashes a fiery attack. The blaze destroys the crossbows on the wall, forcing the knights to flee. They fear that the city is about to fall. At that moment, the Sword Saint invokes a blue magic circle. She draws her sword as powerful energy surrounds her. She reassures the knights, telling them to leave the mother dragon to her and continue defending the city. As the mother dragon launches another fiery assault, the Sword Saint uses her sword energy storm technique to create a barrier around the city, blocking the attack. The dragons outside the barrier continue their assault. Lin Tian, watching from a hill with his goblin forces, is impressed by the Sword Saint's power. He sees this as the perfect opportunity to strike. He orders the goblins to descend into the city now that the barrier is down. With the dragons inside, the city is set ablaze. Amid the chaos, Loda, injured from battling a dragon, realizes how dire the situation is. A man runs through the streets, shouting that goblins are invading. Alarmed, Loda knows the situation is getting worse. More dragons descend, attacking the knights, who barely manage to defend themselves. Loda and Freya decide to confront the goblins. They chase after those pursuing a woman, unaware they are walking into a trap. Goblins hide on the rooftops, ready to ambush them. As they near a sewer, a goblin attacks Loda, cutting his leg and causing him to fall. The goblins quickly capture Freya with a net. She screams for help as more goblins surround Loda, who lies injured on the ground. The city is in chaos. Houses are burning, the sky is filled with dragons, and goblins overrun the streets. Seeing that Loda is injured and Freya has been captured, two knights decide to help them. They rush forward, but are ambushed by Lin Tian, who approaches silently and decapitates them before they can react. Freya, terrified, watches in horror as Loda, enraged, tries to fight back but is knocked unconscious by Lin Tian. The goblins tie up Freya and prepare to drag her and Loda out of the city through the sewers. Lin Tian then leads a group of goblins to attack the city's archers. Hearing the screams, the Sword Saint realizes something is terribly wrong. She can't believe goblins are attacking at such a critical moment. Distracted by the chaos, she fails to notice that the mother dragon has transformed into human form. The dragon, now watching the situation with satisfaction, smiles as she observes the knights struggling to defend themselves. The Sword Saint, sensing the growing danger, turns her focus back to the battle, aware that the fate of the city rests in her hands. The mother dragon leaps into the air, surrounded by powerful energy, as she prepares to attack the Sword Saint. The Sword Saint stands firm, staring at the dragon with a mocking expression. She asks if the dragon is worried and decides to see how much dragon blood it has. Just before the mother dragon can approach, the Sword Saint unsheathes her sword. She uses her ultimate technique, Steel Gale Cuts, and swings her sword, launching powerful cuts toward the dragon. The mother dragon quickly puts both arms in front of her face, clenching her teeth tightly. She manages to block the attack at the last second. The Sword Saint looks at her calmly, thinking that the dragon mother issue is almost resolved. She wonders if Loda has taken care of the dragons and goblins. While she is deep in thought, a strong explosion occurs in the city, sending several knights flying into the air. The Sword Saint turns her head back and feels confused upon seeing the explosion. She soon realizes that the riot is not over yet. The mother dragon begins to stand up and stare at the Sword Saint. She smiles when she sees that the goblins have arrived just in time. Now that the Sword Saint is distracted, the mother dragon takes advantage of this moment. She transforms into energy and begins to flee, saying goodbye. While the Sword Saint's body is surrounded by powerful energy, she turns around, wondering what is happening. The mother dragon flies away, telling her to wait until she heals, saying she will not let her go so easily. The Sword Saint puts her hand near her mouth and looks at the dragon with a piercing gaze. Upon seeing the mother dragon escape, she realizes this is not good. She wipes her mouth with her hand, and with a determined look, says she will go to Dragon Island to kill the entire dragon race. Several hours later, in the Dark City, the Sword Saint arrives. She finishes off many of the goblins lurking around. Holding her sword in one hand, she extends the other hand to one side and asks the knights where Loda is. She thinks they are useless, since they cannot even kill some goblins. In front of her, a wounded knight sits on the ground next to a scared woman with torn clothes. With one hand on the ground and the other over his wound, the knight reveals that Loda and I have been captured by goblins. The Sword Saint approaches them, and upon hearing this, she clenches her teeth tightly. With a furious look, she wonders how this is possible. The city is filled with knights' corpses. The wounded knight tells her these goblins are unusual, with strength comparable to a great species. He adds that not even Loda has been able to defeat them. The Sword Saint looks at the ground without saying a word. She turns her back on the knight, clenches her fist tightly, and decides to go after all the goblin tribes in the haunted forests. The woman next to her looks at her with a confused expression. Just before she can leave, the woman grabs her arm with both hands, starts crying, and asks her to stay. No one knows if the evil goblins will return to attack. People in the city approach the area and bow before the Sword Saint. They explain they are from the town and the Empire and ask her to stay with them. She looks at the ground with a lost gaze and thinks they are right. Compared to a captured member of the hero squad, protecting the people of the temple is her duty. If Loda is going to blame someone, he can only blame himself for being too weak to kill some goblins. She decides to ask for help from the royal family. Meanwhile, in the goblin tribe, the goblins and elves are doing their daily tasks. Little goblins inform everyone that the boss has returned. Lin Tian and the others come back, having captured I and Loda. They tie the two humans by their hands and throw them onto the ground near a rock. The goblin wearing a crest turns his back on them and, as he walks away, orders the others to behave. Loda, with his hands tied, looks at the goblins with a furious gaze. The goblins approach an elf and scold her. Loda explains to I that even these goblins hold many elves captive. I begins to blush and, while panting heavily, tells him there might be a hero in this tribe. Loda asks her if she has recovered a bit. I clasps her hands together, closes her eyes, and begins to use her power, causing golden energy to appear around her body. She says the poison is very strong, and her body still needs time to recover. At that moment, Lin Tian appears and smiles upon seeing the poison's effect has worn off quickly. He praises I, saying her recovery ability is incredible. She opens her eyes and starts trembling. Loda looks at Lin Tian with a gaze full of hatred. Just then, a goblin appears, grabbing Loda's arm with one hand and placing the other on his head. Lin Tian grabs I by the leg. She panics and asks him how he knows her name and what he is trying to do. Lin Tian smiles and asks if she really wants to know his plans. He digs his sharp nails into her leg, causing her to scream in agony. While she screams, Lin Tian enjoys the moment. Beside them, Loda tries to intervene, but a goblin grabs him by the arms. Loda cannot help but feel angry. With a furious look, he shouts at Lin Tian to stop. The goblin slaps him in the face and orders him not to shout at the boss. Due to the blow, Loda falls to the ground. As he gets up, Lin Tian pulls his sharp nails from I's leg. Loda looks at Lin Tian with disdain and realizes he is a goblin with high intelligence. He asks if Lin Tian has not considered the consequences of capturing them, adding that the Sword Saint's power could kill the entire goblin tribe in one blow. Lin Tian smiles and reveals that the Sword Saint will also be his prey, but it is not yet time. He has already sent someone to hide their tracks. Even if she wants to find them, she will not be able to locate them here. Lin Tian stands up, wipes his hand with a handkerchief, and orders the goblins to let some second-generation goblins kill more monsters in the forest. While I rides in pain on the ground, the goblins approach them. One goblin places his hand over his chest, bows his head before Lin Tian, and replies with an understanding. The operation has become so big that humans will not be able to let it pass. Lin Tian puts his foot on Loda's chest and tells him he is going to ask questions, and Loda must answer. If he does not cooperate, Lin Tian is not sure which part of his body will be missing. Loda clenches his teeth, thinking this is not good.